Casshern Sins is a rather obscure title that not many people know about. Instead of telling you the premise myself, I'll just let Leuze do it.
You took the life of the sun that was named Moon. And now, the world is dead.
And there you have it, Casshern Sins. Sci-fi, adventure, action, drama, and some psychology. An after the end story. The story is kind of difficult to describe. It doesn't really have a clearly defined beginning or end. It starts off watching Casshern lay waste to robots. It's never really revealed what led up to that point. In fact, that's how a lot of the events pan out. Things just start happening, and we're just expected to accept it. The first half is, for the most part, a bunch of disjointed episodic happenings that don't have much continuity. The loose strand tying these episodes together is that we're basically following Casshern on his quest through the wasteland to uncover the secrets of his past and unlock pieces of his memory. On this journey, he encounters victims of the ruin, which is a strange phenomenon I could only describe as a plague that chips away at and eventually destroys robots. Some struggle against it, desperately hoping to cling to life and doing whatever they can to do so, and some embrace it, accepting it as inevitable. These issues going on with the side characters Casshern meets help define the existential crisis of the main characters as well, particularly Casshern, causing him to ask a lot of philosophical questions, but not find many answers. The second half is where an actual continuous story starts to take shape, in the form of Casshern's quest for Luna, who apparently is back somehow after he killed her, which was the supposed cause for the ruin. Like I said, the narrative lacks a clearly defined beginning, and the end is the same way, with a lot of open-endedness. It actually probably wouldn't be much of a stretch if I were to claim that the most important aspects of the show are the pieces of flashbacks that we gradually pick up along the course of the show. However, there are a lot of plot-critical questions that you'll probably find yourself asking along the way. Leaving things open to interpretation can be an effective storytelling method, but there are times when the things left open to interpretation are aspects that are critical to the central basis of the plot. Unfortunately, Casshern Sins does the latter. Leuze is quite the interesting case. Her sister, who was a protector of Luna, was critically wounded when Casshern came to kill her, eventually succumbing to her injuries. But now she sees that he truly has no memory of what he did in the past. Indeed, he is a completely different person. So what do you do now that you finally have a chance to take revenge for your sister? The reason you had given yourself to keep living for. But the object of your vengeance has no memory of his sin, nor does it seem like he would ever do it again. It's interesting to see this conflict going on inside her. It serves as a great source for character development and drama. I already talked about Casshern himself for the most part, so not much needs to be said about him. All the other characters are really well done, naturally Ringo and OG the most. It's really interesting to see how the ruin has affected these different individuals and their views on life and death. As you can see from the clips, the visuals are really impressive. Madhouse always puts out top-notch animation, but even by their own standards, they outdid themselves this time. The colors are generally darker and duller, making the rarer bright ones stand out more. The character designs are the most unique I've ever seen in anime, though the faceless mooks that are mostly Casshern fodder look more or less the same. It would have been nice to have more attention given to their appearance. This also unfortunately serves as a way to differentiate the unimportant individuals from the semi-important ones right off the bat. The more important the character, generally, the better their design. There are some really detailed particle and dust effects that you get to see a lot, since there are a large number of instances where robots rust, crumble, and turn to dust. The landscapes are stark, grim, detailed wastelands. There are a few rare oases of scenery porn that stand out a lot, considering the generally depressing scenes that are commonplace. The opening theme is probably the most dissonant OP I've ever heard in anime. It's happy and upbeat and doesn't fit the overall tone of the show at all. The ending themes are pretty good though, particularly the first one, which is one of my favorite EDs. The soundtrack is hit and miss. Some of the tracks are dramatic and beautiful, but some of them are boring and repetitive. However, regardless of the quality of the individual tracks, all of them are still great for setting the mood. The sound effects are equally hit and miss. Most of them are good, but some are also bland and repetitive. It's kind of weird that there are any generic ones at all when you compare them to how good the rest are. If you're a fan of English dubs, you're in luck, because a dub is great, even by Funimation standards. Funimation pretty much always has high quality dubs, but I feel that they put more effort into this one than they usually do. Janice is a robot who sings a couple songs throughout the course of the series, and they re-recorded them with Caitlin Glass singing, who also happens to be Janice's voice actress, and a great one at that. Caitlin's singing is simply phenomenal. It actually sounds nearly identical to the original, but with improved pronunciation and fixed English. Leuze is one of the roles that made Brina Palencia one of my favorite voice actors ever, and to this day, I still feel it's the best performance she's ever given. From her very first line, she just felt like she was Leuze. She really fit the role like a glove, delivering every line perfectly. I personally found Layuze to be the best character in the show, and I doubt I would have been able to feel for her character the way I did if Brina hadn't brought her to life. Eric Vale is a superb Casshern, and is particularly great during scenes of great emotional duress. Monica Rial is typecasted perfectly as Ringo, and implements her diabetes-inducing voice to great effect. There's a good number of other familiar voices of which you'll probably recognize at least a couple for side characters, but one that I feel needs mentioning is Trina Nishimura, who plays Luna. I had never heard of her name before, but I found out that I had heard her performances before in numerous places, notably Rachel in Baccano, Lan Fan in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and Mari in Evangelion 2.0. I just didn't recognize her because she sounded so differently than she did before. Anyway, Luna, as you'll find out for yourself, is a pretty cold and uncaring and selfish bitch, and Trina brings that personality to life perfectly. To summarize sound, music, hit and miss, but overall pretty good. Sound effects, hit and miss, good overall. Voice acting, superb. There are 3 important things you should know about this show in general. The first, Casshern Sins isn't a show that you should watch just for pure entertainment. It's not a show to watch if you just want to turn off your brain. There are some plot-critical things that will go straight over your head if you aren't paying attention during key pieces of dialogue. The second, Casshern Sins is not about the action. Action scenes are creative, and are actually pretty great to watch for the first time, but you'll quickly realize that the fights are basically the same every time, with almost no variation, especially in the numerous scenes where a bunch of generic, monocolored robots are being wasted. If the action is all you look forward to, you're watching the wrong show. You're completely missing the real meat of the series. Thirdly, and perhaps the most important, Casshern Sins is not a happy anime. I kind of mentioned this before, the overall tone of the series is really dark. This is evident both in the imagery and the depressing events that occur. This helps the viewer appreciate the rare beautiful moments of happiness when they do happen. The dark and depressing scenes still greatly outnumber them, and if that bothers you, Casshern Sins isn't for you. I believe there could have been an interesting philosophical stance regarding the line between robots and humans, since a good number of robots look pretty much identical to humans, and bleed, and feel pain and emotions. There could have been some philosophical debates on if robots have souls and whatnot. The closest thing we get is,
but were we ever alive to begin with?
and that's really it. It's an idea that definitely had great potential to be explored in this show. Casshern Sins is abstract. By that I mean, it's hard to pick out any one overarching theme. It's not really clear what the whole point of it all is. One of the minor ones is obviously that hope still exists, even in the midst of calamity, but this is only really touched on in the first half. It's not just in the themes either. There just isn't much of anything to help someone like you or me identify with what's going on. Little to keep us grounded. That's why the characters are so crucial. They are the anchor. Without them, everything would be lost in you as the viewer. The artsiness of the presentation and lack of solid, concrete dialogue and explanations underscore this. In fact, there just isn't a ton of dialogue in general. A lot of screen time is dedicated to silent introspection. It's impossible to tell how much time passes between events either. It leaves a lot of things open to your interpretation, some of which are just too important not to explain. Critic score, 6. As far as satisfactory endings go, Casshern Sins is quite bad. I can't say anything without spoiling shit, but let's just say that there are too many important questions that aren't answered. Ending score, 4. I'm going to talk about spoilerific things now that are just gripes with the unsatisfactory open-endedness of the ending, and big questions that should have been answered, and should really only be watched if you've seen it, so if you don't want spoilers, stop watching now. Okay, so one of the minor things I didn't like was the lack of follow-up with minor characters we met earlier, like Janice. A bigger one, however, is that we're given no clear resolution about the state of the ruin and the planet as a whole. Does humanity ever recover? Are there enough humans left to even procreate and rebuild? Do the robots eventually all succumb to the ruin? Whatever happens to Casshern? I really hated Luna's selfish vanity. It's pretty sad how much she was loved when you consider how truly despicable she was. It would have been nice to know what she was exactly, since her death basically brought death into the world. It also would have been nice to know how she even came back to life. If I interpreted things right, she came back to life by bringing ruin into the world. If I were Casshern, I would have at least tried to kill her at the end to see if the ruin would stop. You know, just to try it. There are just too many questions and not enough answers.
But